I am Emily, 25, and my life is a map of silences. Each one drawn in shadows I've learned to navigate but never escape. Sitting here in my small riverside apartment, with the hum of the world outside and my daughter Lily sleeping softly in the next room, I feel the pull of my past like a tide, urging me to speak. My story isn't one of heroes or happy endings, it's a jagged path through betrayal, shame, and the kind of love that burns as much as it heals. I've been broken by hands I trusted, silenced by a world that didn't listen, but I'm still here, piecing myself together. Let me tell you how it began, not to unburden my soul, but to claim it, to trace the lines of who I was and who I'm becoming. It starts in Savannah, under a canopy of moss and secrets, where a girl learned to tiptoe around her mother's grief. My childhood wasn't a cradle of warmth or wonder. It was a labyrinth of shadows, each turn marked by my mother's quiet despair. Diane, my mother, was a woman hollowed out by a marriage that left her with bruises on her skin and a daughter she struggled to love. My father, a man I never knew, was a specter in our lives, his violence lingering in the way she flinched at sudden noises, the way she locked her bedroom door, even in the safety of her parents' home. We lived in Savannah, Georgia, in a house draped in Spanish moss where the air was thick with the scent of magnolias and unspoken grief. My grandparents, who took us in when I was an infant, were kind but weary, their love stretched thin by the burden of raising a child they hadn't planned for. I was a ghost in their home, a quiet girl who clung to the edges of rooms, watching my mother unravel. Diane worked long hours at a diner, her hands perpetually stained with grease, her eyes distant as she counted tips under the flicker of a kitchen bulb. I learned to move softly, to avoid the sharp edges of her sorrow, to make myself small so as not to add to her weight. I was 8 when she met Ronald, a man with a steady gaze and hands that never struck. He was a carpenter, his fingers calloused but gentle, his voice a low hum that seemed to soothe her frayed nerves. They married in a quiet ceremony, and we moved to San Bernardino, California, to a squat house with peeling paint and a yard choked with weeds. Ronald was kind to me, never raising his voice, always offering a smile when I passed him in the hall. But the past clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I saw it in my mother's tense shoulders, the way she checked the locks twice before bed, even with Ronald beside her. Her fear became mine, a silent inheritance that settled in my bones. As a teenager, I sought escape in Chris, a boy with storm-gray eyes and a heart as scarred as my own. His mother was dead, his father a drunk who stumbled through life in a haze of whiskey. Chris and I were kindred spirits, drawn together by our shared brokenness, our need to be seen. We'd meet by the dry riverbed behind his house, sharing cigarettes and dreams of a life beyond San Bernardino's dust. At 17, I got pregnant, a reckless mistake that echoed my mother's own. Diane's anger was a tempest, her words cutting deep, but she softened when she saw my resolve. Chris and I married in a courthouse, him in a borrowed suit that hung loose on his lean frame, me in a dress stretched tight over my swelling belly. I stood before the judge, my hand trembling in Chris's, and vowed to build a life together. I thought love would be enough. I was wrong. The memory of that day is a splinter in my heart, sharp, persistent. I can still feel the weight of Chris's hand, the flicker of hope in his eyes, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. But hope is a fragile thing, easily crushed by the weight of reality. As I look back, I see the cracks already forming, the whispers of a tragedy I couldn't yet name. The world was waiting to break us, and I was too young to see it coming. Marriage was a dream that crumbled under the weight of poverty and absence. Chris was restless, chasing construction jobs that took him across state lines, leaving me alone in a San Bernardino shack that groaned with every gust of wind. I was 19, pregnant, and drowning in bills, my days a blur of exhaustion and fear. The world felt like a vice, squeezing tighter with each passing day. To survive, I moved in with Walter, Chris's father, a widower of 65 who lived in a cluttered bungalow that reeked of stale tobacco and unwashed dishes. Walter was a man of silences, his face a map of creases that hinted at a life of unspoken regrets. At first, he was unobtrusive, shuffling through the house with a limp, muttering about the news or the weather. I cooked his meals, scrubbed his floors, and tended to his needs, all while my belly grew heavy with Toby. But as the weeks passed, I began to feel his eyes on me, not the absent gaze of an old man, but something sharper, hungrier. When I bent to sweep the floor or wore a dress that clung to my swollen frame, his stare would linger, a spider's thread stretching across my skin. I told myself it was nothing. I was tired, paranoid, my mind warped by hormones and loneliness. But the unease grew, a quiet hum beneath my daily routines. I'd catch him watching me from the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hall. Once, as I washed dishes, I felt his presence behind me, close enough to hear his ragged breath. I spun around, my heart hammering, but he was already gone, leaving only the echo of my own fear. Another time, I found him standing outside my bedroom window, his shadow looming against the glass. He claimed he was checking the gutters, but his eyes told a different story. The night it happened was thick with the heat of a California summer. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing pots, my hands trembling from a day spent fighting nausea and despair. Walter had been drinking, his bottle of whiskey half empty on the table, the air sour with its fumes. I heard his footsteps, uneven and deliberate, and my stomach twisted, a premonition I couldn't shake. I turned to leave, but he was there, blocking the doorway, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Emily," he slurred, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're too pretty to be so sad." I stepped back, my hands gripping the counter, my voice caught in my throat. "Walter, please," I whispered, but he moved closer, his presence suffocating. His fingers grazed my arm, then tightened, his nails digging into my skin. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger, his body pressing against mine, pinning me against the counter. His lips found my neck, rough and invasive, and I froze, my mind screaming while my body betrayed me with stillness. "No," I said, louder this time, my hands pushing against his chest. But he was relentless, his hands tearing at my blouse, the fabric ripping like a cry in the night. I clawed at him, my nails drawing blood, but he laughed, a low, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. He pushed me to the floor, his weight crushing me, his breath hot and sour against my face. I fought, my legs kicking, my voice breaking into sobs. But he was a storm, unstoppable, his desire a force I couldn't withstand. When it was over, he stumbled back, muttering apologies that dissolved into the air. I lay on the linoleum, my body shaking, my blouse in tatters around me. The kitchen was still, the only sound the drip of the faucet, a metronome to my unraveling. My skin burned where he'd touched me, my mind a storm of shame and rage. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen, trapped in the wreckage of my own body. As I sat there, clutching the remnants of my clothes, a question burned through the fog. How did I let this happen? The days that followed were a descent into a private hell. I scrubbed my skin raw in the shower as if I could wash away the memory of Walter's hands, but the stain remained, a shadow that clung to my soul. I avoided him, locking my bedroom door, eating in my room, but his presence was a constant threat, his footsteps a reminder of my vulnerability. I wanted to tell Chris, to pour the truth into his ear during his brief, distracted calls, but he was a ghost, always on the road, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I'm working for us, he'd say, as if my pain was a luxury we couldn't afford. Toby was born in a haze of agony and fear, his cries a lifeline that tethered me to the world. He was perfect, with Chris's storm-gray eyes and a fragility that broke my heart. I thought motherhood would save me, give me a purpose to cling to, but it only deepened my isolation. Walter was still there, his presence a constant threat, though he kept his distance after that night. I locked my bedroom door, avoided his gaze, but the damage was done. I was a husk, moving through life while my soul withered. Chris came home sporadically, his visits brief and strained. He barely looked at me, his attention fixed on Toby or his phone. I tried to reach him, to bridge the chasm between us, but he was unreachable, lost in a world I couldn't touch. "You're always so tired, he'd say, his voice edged with irritation. "Can't you just be happy for once?" His words were a blade, cutting deeper than he knew. I wanted to scream, to tell him what his father had done, but the shame was a gag, silencing me. In my loneliness, I began to unravel, Walter's touch, once a violation, became a twisted refuge, a way to feel something other than emptiness. It started with small things: a brush of his hand as I passed him in the hall, a lingering hug when I brought him his coffee. I hated myself for it, but I let it happen. Each encounter a deeper plunge into a darkness I couldn't name. He'd find me in the laundry room, his hands gentle at first, his voice soft with false kindness. "You're so good to me, Emily," he'd murmur, his fingers tracing my arm. I'd freeze, my mind screaming to run, but my body would betray me, yielding to the need for connection, however warped. The guilt was a living thing, clawing at my insides. I'd lie awake at night, Toby's soft breaths beside me, and wonder how I'd become this person, this weak, broken woman who let a monster touch her. I saw myself in the mirror and saw a stranger, her eyes hollow, her mouth a thin line of self-loathing. I wanted to run, to take Toby and disappear, but I was trapped, bound by poverty and shame. The house became a labyrinth, each creak of the floorboards a warning, each shadow a threat. One evening, as I rocked Toby to sleep, I heard Walter's voice outside my door, low and insistent. "Emily, we need to talk." My heart lurched, my hands tightening around Toby's small body. I didn't answer, but the doorknob rattled, a quiet threat that sent me scrambling to wedge a chair under it. He didn't try again, but the fear lingered, a reminder that I was never safe. I began to plan, to squirrel away money in a tin hidden behind the flour canister, to dream of a life beyond this prison. But the question haunted me: would he let me go? Walter became a force I couldn't escape, a shadow that consumed me. What began as a single act of violence evolved into something more insidious, a dance of power and need that twisted my soul. He knew my weaknesses, my loneliness, the way I craved any scrap of affection. He used it against me, his touches growing bolder, his demands more explicit. I was a puppet, my strings pulled by a man who saw me as his possession, his eyes gleaming with a hunger that made my skin crawl. One night stands out, a memory so vivid it burns. It was raining, the kind of relentless downpour that turned the world to static. The window streaked with silver. I had just bathed, my skin damp, my body draped in a lace dress that clung to my curves. I was in my room, brushing my hair, the mirror reflecting a woman I barely recognized. The door creaked, and Walter was there, his silhouette filling the frame, his eyes dark and predatory. My heart lurched, a rabbit caught in a snare. "Emily," he said, his voice low and thick, laced with whiskey and want. "You look like an angel tonight." I backed away, my hands trembling, the brush falling to the floor with a clatter. "Walter, don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but he was faster, his body closing the distance between us. He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers bruising, and pushed me onto the bed. The mattress creaked under my weight, a sound that echoed my fear. His kisses were frantic, devouring, as if he could consume the parts of me I'd already lost. I fought at first, my hands pushing against his chest, my nails raking his skin, but my strength faltered, eroded by months of despair. He tore the dress from my body, the lace shredding under his hands, and I gasped, the sound swallowed by the rain. His hands were everywhere, rough and possessive, mapping my skin with a greed that made me sick. "You want this," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear, and I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that I hated him. But my voice was gone, stolen by the weight of his body. He dragged me to the bathroom, the cold tiles a shock against my bare skin. The shower was still running, the steam curling around us like a shroud, the water scalding as it hit my back. He pressed himself against me, his movements relentless, his hands gripping my hips as if I might vanish. I closed my eyes, retreating to a place where I could pretend this wasn't happening, but my body betrayed me, responding in ways that filled me with shame. The water stung my skin, mingling with tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. He kissed me again, his lips bruising, his tongue invasive, and I felt myself splinter, my mind fracturing under the weight of his desire. When it was over, he left without a word, his footsteps fading into the rain. I sank to the bathroom floor, the tiles cold against my bruised skin, the shower still running, its roar drowning out my sobs. My body was a map of pain, each mark a testament to my defeat. I lay there for hours, the water turning cold, my mind a storm of self-loathing and resolve. Something broke in me that night, not just my spirit, but my willingness to stay. I couldn't live like this. Tethered to a man who destroyed me, married to a husband who didn't care. The next morning, I called a lawyer, my hands shaking as I dialed. I wanted a divorce. I wanted to be free. But as I sat in the lawyer's office, my voice steadied despite the fear clawing at my chest. A new terror took root. Walter was a man who took what he wanted, a man who saw me as his. What would he do when he learned I was leaving? Would he let me go? Or would he tighten his grip, a spider refusing to release its prey? The question was a shadow, following me home, whispering of dangers yet to come. The divorce was a war I wasn't ready for. Chris fought for custody of Toby, his sudden interest in our son a cruel twist of the knife. He stood in the courtroom, his face a mask of righteous indignation, claiming I was unfit, unstable, a mother who couldn't be trusted. I wanted to scream, to tell the judge about Walter, about the nights I'd spent protecting Toby from the monster in our home, but the shame was a chain, binding my tongue. The court awarded Chris custody, and I watched my baby slip away, his tiny hand waving from the back seat of Chris's car, his cries echoing in my ears long after he was gone. I had nothing left, no husband, no child, no home, so I went back to my mother. Diane and Ronald welcomed me into their San Bernardino house, their faces etched with pity. I thought I could heal there, that the familiarity of my mother's embrace would stitch me back together. But I was wrong. Ronald, the man I'd once trusted, began to change. His kindness turned cloying, his touches lingering too long, his smiles carrying a weight I recognized all too well. It started with small things, a hand on my shoulder as he passed me in the kitchen, a hug that pressed too close, his fingers lingering on my back. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was projecting my trauma onto an innocent man, but the signs were unmistakable. I'd catch him watching me as I read on the couch, his eyes tracing the curve of my neck, the hem of my skirt. Once, as I folded laundry, he stood too close, his breath warm against my ear as he murmured, "You've grown into such a beautiful woman, Emily." I froze, my hands trembling, a memory of Walter's voice flashing through my mind. The night it happened was quiet, the house wrapped in the stillness of a late summer evening. My mother was asleep upstairs, her bedroom door closed, the hum of her fan a faint drone. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, the warm water soothing my aching hands. Ronald appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hall, a glass of wine in his hand. His eyes were different, hungry, and my stomach twisted, a premonition I couldn't ignore. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but heavy, laced with something dark. "You've been through so much. Let me help you." I stepped back, my hands gripping the edge of the sink, the dish slipping from my fingers into the soapy water. "I'm fine," I said, my voice unsteady, but he moved closer, his presence suffocating. He reached for me, his fingers brushing my arm, and I flinched, my body remembering the weight of another man's hands. "No," I said, louder this time, but he was undeterred, his hand sliding to my waist, his grip tightening. "You don't have to be alone," he murmured, his breath hot with wine, his eyes locked on mine. I pushed against him, my hands shaking, but he was stronger, his body pressing me against the counter. His lips found my neck, his hands tearing at my shirt, the buttons popping free with a sound like gunfire. I fought, my nails raking his skin, my voice breaking into sobs. But he was relentless, his strength overpowering my resistance. He pushed me to the floor, the tiles cold against my back, his weight crushing me, his hands everywhere. When it was over, he stood, adjusting his clothes as if nothing had happened, his face a mask of calm. "You'll be fine," he said, his voice devoid of remorse. And then he was gone, his footsteps fading up the stairs. I lay there, my body trembling, my shirt in tatters, the kitchen spinning around me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the drip of the faucet, a cruel echo of that night with Walter. I wanted to scream, to wake my mother, to tell the world what he'd done, but the shame was a gag, silencing me. It happened again and again, each assault a mirror of the past, a reminder that I was trapped in a cycle I couldn't break. Ronald was careful, choosing moments when my mother was out, when the house was empty, his actions cloaked in the guise of concern. He'd find me in the laundry room, the backyard, the living room, his hands gentle at first, his voice soft with false kindness. "You need someone to take care of you," he'd say, his fingers tracing my arm, and I'd freeze, my mind screaming to run, but my body would betray me, yielding to the fear of what he might do if I fought back. The house became a prison, each creak of the floorboards a warning of his approach, each shadow a threat. I told no one. Who would believe me? My mother, who had built a life with Ronald, who saw him as her savior. My friends, who saw me as a broken woman, incapable of truth. I was alone, my voice silenced by shame and fear. But the fear was laced with something new, anger. It simmered beneath my skin, a spark that refused to die. I began to watch Ronald, to study his routines, to search for a way out. I hid money in a coffee can behind the flour canister, a few dollars at a time, dreaming of escape. I memorized the sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the rhythm of his footsteps on the stairs, the times when my mother was home. The house was a maze, but I was learning its paths, mapping a route to freedom. The question was whether I could find it before Ronald sensed my plan, before his hunger turned to something darker. The discovery of my pregnancy was a thunderbolt, shattering the fragile equilibrium I'd clung to. I sat on the bathroom floor, the test in my trembling hands, the two pink lines of verdict I couldn't escape. Was the child Walter's, Ronald's? The uncertainty was a poison, seeping into every thought, every breath. I was 25, pregnant, and utterly lost. Standing at the crossroads of morality and survival, I considered abortion, the thought a fleeting whisper in the chaos of my mind. I sat in a clinic waiting room, my hands clasped tight, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing in my ears. But as I watched a young woman leave, her face streaked with tears, something stopped me, a spark of defiance, a refusal to let my body be defined by the men who had violated it. This child, whoever's it was mine, and I would not destroy it to escape my pain. I left my mother's house without a word, packing a single bag in the dead of night, my heart pounding as I slipped past Ronald's bedroom door. I rented a small apartment in Riverside with the money I'd saved, a one-room haven with peeling wallpaper and a window that overlooked a quiet street. I found a job as a receptionist at a law firm, the monotony of phone calls and paperwork a lifeline to normalcy. The days were hard, my body heavy with pregnancy, my mind haunted by memories of Walter's hands, Ronald's breath, the weight of their desires. But I kept going, driven by a quiet resolve to reclaim my life. People whispered, of course. The single mother with no husband, no story to tell. I felt their judgment in the grocery store, where cashiers eyed my ringless hand, in the doctor's office, where nurses asked pointed questions about the father, in the park, where mothers pulled their children closer as I passed, but their words couldn't touch me anymore. I was done living for others, for Chris, who had abandoned me, for Walter, who had stolen my body, for Ronald, who had betrayed my trust, for the world that had chewed me up and spit me out. When my daughter was born, I named her Lily, after the wildflowers that grew in Savannah's marshes. Resilient despite the odds, she was small, perfect, with eyes that held a universe of possibility. Her tiny fingers curling around mine as if to anchor me to the world. Holding her, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. Not the naive hope of my youth, but a hard-won belief that I could be more than my past, that I could build a life for us, free from the shadows that had haunted me. I don't know what the future holds. There are days when the weight of my choices threatens to crush me, when the ghosts of Walter and Ronald linger in the corners of my mind, their voices whispering of my shame. I still wake in the night, my heart racing, certain I hear their footsteps outside my door. But I am here, alive, with Lily in my arms. I am learning to forgive myself, to see the woman in the mirror as someone worthy of love, someone who fought to survive. This is my story, not a fairy tale, not a tragedy, but a testament to the strength it takes to keep going. I think of Toby, out there with Chris, and my heart aches, but I hold on to the hope that one day I'll see him again, that I'll be the mother he deserves. For now, I have Lily, her laughter a light in the darkness, her presence a reminder that I am more than my pain. I am Emily, and I am still here, writing my own ending, one defiant step at a time. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, When Lily's soft breaths fill the room and the world outside my riverside window is still, I feel the weight of all I've carried. It's not just the scars on my body or the memories that wake me, heart pounding. Certain I hear footsteps in the dark. It's the ache of knowing I've been broken not once, but over and over, by men who saw me as less than human, by a world that turned its eyes away. I've stood in the wreckage of my own choices, wondering if I could have fought harder, run sooner, screamed louder, but I've learned that guilt is a thief, stealing the strength it takes to rise again. I don't ask for pity. I ask only that you see me not as a victim, but as a woman who's clawed her way back from the edge, who's learned to love herself through the shame. I carry Toby's absence like a stone in my chest, but I hold on to the hope that one day he'll know his mother fought for him, even when she lost. And Lily, my Lily, she's my dawn, her laughter a reminder that life can bloom in the hardest places. I'm still here, piecing myself together, not for the world's approval, but for the girl I was, the woman I am, the mother I'll become. If you've ever felt alone, betrayed, or silenced, know that I've walked that road too, and I'm still walking, one step at a time, toward a light I'm learning to trust.